My name's Danielle Phillips. As Carl mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you about communication, and you're all thinking, oh, right, that's not a technical evening, that's something a bit different, hopefully, and hopefully it will be. The intent of this is really to have a bit of a conversation and share some of my experience with you as to how I've been involved in communicating a big safety strategy. So without further ado, I shall attempt to share my screen. The presentation is all about talking about how we create a safety culture at a company called Toll Group, which is a logistics company based out of Australia, but has a global footprint. And it was sort of 7, 8, 9 years ago, I was working there as the head of communication and employee engagement for working at the corporate head office. So my role had a broad remit, and the safety communication and staff engagement within safety came under that. So I just want to sort of talk you through what we did and how we did it, and give you some ideas as to the sorts of things that we did then, about how we sort of built a safety culture. And please forgive me, this is not a teaching you how to suck eggs thing. I know you've all got safety as part of what you do, and so this is just about showing you what we did, and then I'd like to have a conversation at the end of it, answer any questions that you might have about things that we did, things that you're doing, ideas, and sort of sharing some best practice. So let's dive in. So I'm, as you might have guessed from my accent, not a Yorkshire native. I'm based up in the northeast, so still relatively close, in County Durham, which looks like that on a nice day. Hasn't looked like that for a while. Anyway, so that's County Durham. So that's Durham city centre. For those of you who haven't visited, please come and visit us when we can. That's where I met Carl, your chairman. So Carl and I have recently just completed our MBA program at the university. We've completed it, Carl. High five. We finally be grateful that we've got no more of that to do. So during the course of that study, we talked about what we do, and Carl said, oh, it might be good for you to come along and speak to the Institute about communication and engagement. So fortunately, here I am. Sorry, everyone. I hope I don't bore you to tears. Let's hope not. So hopefully in a few months' time, Carl and I will be wearing our cap and gown and graduating from Durham University. While I'm not studying, I run my own communications consultancy called Inside Out. And the idea of that is that we create brand advocates from within the business. So work with lots of different organisations of all shapes and sizes to help really get your employers to understand what they're there to do it effectively, and then spruik that good news story externally. So effectively, they're your internal marketeers. And that's why culture plays such a big part, because it's no longer just words on the page. It's felt and lived and breathed by the people who work there. So that's why embedding something like safety is a cultural aspect rather than just a post, putting a poster up and hoping for the best, is so important. And that's what leads you to really have a successful safety culture. So as I mentioned, I worked for this company, Toll Group, which is head office is in Melbourne. So some nice pictures of Melbourne, which again, until quite recently, has looked a bit different to this. Not very many people filling the MCG these days. But that's, we lived and loved living there for quite some time, and had the opportunity to work for this fantastic company, Toll Group. So Toll, as I mentioned, is, and certainly was then and remains, the Asia Pacific's leading provider of logistics. So that is a multimodal organisation that provides logistics in all different shapes and sizes. So as you can see, there's a few different modes of transport here, but I mean, really from contract logistics, managing large warehouses, through to managing offshore oil and gas supply lines and facilities up in Asia, from PUDs to motorbike couriers to aircraft, all sorts, everything you can imagine in between. And, as you might also imagine, a few random businesses like print businesses and things like that. So whatever communication we did had to kind of transcend this large organisation that did so many things, and people who worked there had a breadth of skills and talents. So there are 45,000 employees who were working there at the time that I was, and of those, they were based in about 55 countries, speaking about, I think it was 36 predominant languages, and in 1,200 sites. So it was a huge logistics challenge just to even reach the staff with any kind of communication that we did. And obviously translation had to be accounted for, and local, nuance and things like that had to be thought through. So it wasn't a straightforward process, but that's what made it fun. So that's the kind of context of the organisation. Huge player in Australia. I think, Adrian, you gave away in your accent that you may be from Australia, so you might have heard of this company before, but in the ASX and the FTSE 100 equivalent there, it was a listed company trading within the top 100. So a big known household name. And so I started when the guy on the left of my screen, Paul Little, the guy with the light grey suit and little hair, was the MD, and he was part of a management buyout of the company in the 80s. And so he'd been in the organisation for about 25 years and had really made his mark. And the other guy, the slightly younger guy in the darker suit on the right, he, at the time, Brian Kruger, was the CFO. And when Paul stepped down, Brian then went into the MD's role. And so Brian had seriously big shoes to fill in terms of Paul's legacy, and obviously wanted to create his own legacy and reason for taking the role and things like that. And so very quickly, Brian worked out that he wanted to instill some new values in the organisation. And one of the values he wanted to live and to breathe was that of safety. He come from, I think, Blue Scope Steel and BHP Billiton, so similar heavy industries to what you'd be used to, and was very much aware of the risks associated with working in that way and working in that sort of field. And I'd obviously had to make some pretty awful phone calls that none of us want to have to make to loved ones about injury and death of people when they're at work. And so he was he wasn't quite passionate. He was absolutely passionate about the need to instill a safety culture within Toll. And it wasn't that Toll didn't value safety at the time. It was that the company had grown quite quickly and through about 55 acquisitions over that 25-year period. And as many of you will have experienced, acquisitions don't always naturally fit and get well absorbed into the company. The cultures often clash and things like that. So there was a real opportunity to kind of galvanize the organization around some really strong values. And the value of safety was something that everyone could get involved in, get on board with, because it made sense and it was something that was personal. So that was sort of Brian's goal. And Brian came over to my desk one day and said, right, I want you to be involved in this. So where do we start? And I said, let's have a chat. So there was a kind of crack team of myself, the head of safety, and a couple of his team who tried to work out how we could build a safety culture. Now, naturally, we don't do that overnight. So it took a bit of time. So let's have a look at how we did that. So the idea was to have this thing of safety first. So safety would become the most important value and the biggest thing in the organisation. Nothing was to be done if it wasn't safe, and in fact was to be stopped if it wasn't safe. So we had a few challenges that we had to deal with. We have talked about the global audience and the complexities of the organisation and the sort of not quite complete sort of integration of various business entities. So some businesses that have been acquired still very much had their own identity. So we did things like we rolled out a single uniform for the whole business, which was huge. And that gave us an opportunity to create a standard there for safety, so that everyone wore the same PPE, everyone had the same high quality, high vis and boots and everything else that they needed. So that sort of helped there. Another challenge was understanding the different, what safety meant in different jurisdictions. So I'm sure you've all seen, images, and you may have seen firsthand how goods are moved in places like India, in that you might just load your rickshaw with your things that you need and move them to where they need to go. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is a cultural norm. So to try and instill a very different approach to safety in some of these jurisdictions took a slightly different approach and made that a bit challenging. We wanted anything that we did to be incredibly inclusive and accessible. So that meant you needed to be able to see yourself in any of the visuals, any of the collateral that we produced. And by that, I meant, didn't just need to be kind of white Melburnian people and men predominantly, and needed to be representative of that business in its entirety. And from an accessibility perspective, needs to be understood in the language that you spoke where possible. So that was a significant challenge. And then it needs to be real and believable. And I think, it's one thing for the management to say safety is really important around here, but you sort of need to see it being proven to believe it. And I think, we're talking to quite a pragmatic audience here who, they're not don't necessarily believe the corporate spin, and they want to see, what's actually going to be done to make a difference. So we needed to convince people with some real believable stuff. And then had to change some long-held beliefs in the sector. So I think, it won't be a surprise to you that the trucking sector, particularly within Australia, didn't have great reputation at one point in time. It was lots of, should we say, allegations around how individuals fuel themselves to work long hours. So it was a case of we needed to change some perceptions both within and outside of the business, and really just instill a bit of trust, I think, in this could be done. So that was just a few challenges to work through there. And time obviously was a challenge too. It needed to be done yesterday, so we obviously have to work at speed with these things. But the opportunity was significant. So the idea that you'd have a safe place to work, I think for some people in some of those jurisdictions was revolutionary and fabulous, which would in turn turn us into an employer of choice, both within the Australian context and more broader, further afield. And again, it wasn't that we weren't, it was just that this was about elevating that brand reputation and potentially creating that ripple effect within the community as well, so that it was known what we did. It wasn't just a hope. It was a kind of, I always had this vision that if you saw one of those green trucks on the road, that you would know automatically that was going to be someone who was driving safely, knew what they were doing. They weren't going to swerve out in front of you. You sort of had the confidence to overtake them with ease. And that to me meant that we would then sort of instill that within the community, that faith and trust. I think it sort of was important that we brought together the business under this sort of common goal. Again, through the way that I'd grown with the acquisitions and things, it was important that they all had a sense of collegiate kind of togetherness, which they hadn't previously had. And then to have an opportunity to become a sector leader. So in terms of our revenue and turnover and the sort of volumes that we did, absolutely a sector leader. But could we be a sector leader in this space? I think the mining companies in Australia had really owned safety. They were phenomenal at doing this because, as you're aware, you have to be. But transport logistics just hadn't yet got there. One other firm was doing good work. And there was an opportunity there to really lead the way and then influence others in the industry, but also the wider community, which I think was an important thing. As a significant road user, it was a chance to sort of explain how, or to demonstrate how the road could be used safely and how we could share the road together. Obviously a point of differentiation for customers, which is obviously a really important thing. And then this idea of being a good corporate citizen and doing the right thing, sort of using your expertise to the benefit of the broader society. So what do? So we decided that we'd go with this tagline: think safe, act safe, be safe. And that became the cornerstone of the whole campaign and is still the tagline that's used today for safety within the organisation. I don't need to explain what it means. You can very much get that from there. So in order to sort of roll this out, we decided to launch a global Stop for Safety, which was really, I suppose, our opportunity to get everyone to just stand still and think about this thing for one time, where we'd never done anything like this before. So that felt very fresh and it felt very different. And it also sent the message very strongly that we cared about this enough so that we would stop everything that we were doing and we would give people the time off what they were doing, paid, to to show that safety was really important and serious. So I think it was probably February time in 2013, we launched our first Stop for Safety. And within a 24-hour period, we asked every single one of the 1,200 sites to stop for an hour and to make sure that every shift got the opportunity to do this. And we sent them all a pack which had in there a DVD. Yes, it was a while ago, so we still did DVDs then. And that DVD was available in the languages that they spoke. So I think we translated into something like 15 languages with subtitles. We then had an exercise in there, which was a chance for them to then watch the video, then have a conversation as a team and talk about what they'd seen, what they'd felt, what they'd kind of learned from that. And then to make a pledge as a team as well around what they were going to do differently. So the whole idea of this first Stop for Safety was everyone has the right to go home safely. And we tried to think about what we could do personally to ensure that would happen. And it was something that was applicable to anyone, regardless of the kind of role that they performed in the organisation. So from everyone who was in, from the admin team and the head office right through to the stevedores and the pilots, there was an opportunity for everyone to think about that in the context of their own roles. And then we gave out some posters and some merchandise. And the merchandise, still got one actually here, was a bit soppy, but it was a little photo frame that we gave out, which says, "My reason for going home safely." It was to put a picture of, your loved one or something that you enjoy doing in there. And we also gave out little key rings as well, so you could put them on your truck keys. It was just that constant reminder of why you were doing what you were doing. And it was hopefully with the intent of winning over the hearts and minds. This is just some of the collateral. This is some of what we did. So you can see over here, these people showing their reasons for going home safely. This is the poster campaign. So we actually went to Thailand, Singapore, and India and took photos and filmed the video that you're soon going to see, as well as, I think, 3 states within Australia, to get a cross-section of the types of the people that worked for the organisation. And while that sounds really extravagant, it wasn't. It was done on a shoestring, but it was done because it was so important that people could see themselves in this and they could see their facilities, or they had the sense that this was something that was not just something coming from head office, but actually was about them. And that had a huge impact on the success of the campaign. Right, now you are going to see a video, so let's just click into that. So that was just a little view of the video there that we had, and the video was actually in 3 parts. That was the sort of the start of it, and then we had another part which was a story of one of our drivers who'd had a significant accident, and I've got that to show you as well. But I just wanted to sort of break it into bits to sort of explain why we did what we did. So this first part was to kind of get everyone to realise that this is for them. So hopefully most people have seen them or someone that they could associate with in that picture and in that short clip I just showed you. And then they knew that where they worked was sort of represented there. So that was the intent of that part. So kind of we've got them watching now, we've got them interested, and hopefully they can sort of watch the next part. So this is a story of Athol, who one of our drivers from Tasmania. I'll show this to you.
I was taking my father to the airport, and 2 police cars passed me, heading south, and I made the comment that I haven't seen rain like this in Tasmania before. It was torrential. Dropped him off at the airport and headed home, and didn't realise where the 2 police cars were on their way to, and got home and received a phone call from one of the fleet controllers. And yeah, it was quite daunting, realising that I'd have to talk to Athel's wife and let her know that what had happened. I didn't know if she already knew, but I knew I'd have to make the phone call. Given what we saw when we first arrived, and one of the things we're trained to as rescue professionals is we read the wreck. And what I saw, I thought, we're possibly going to find a deceased person or more than one deceased person within inside this vehicle. The cab of the truck had actually come right down over the front of him. The steering wheel had basically gone right into his lower abdomen area, and we couldn't see either his right or his left leg. To see that Athol was there, and the people had told us prior to our arrival that he was coherent, he was trapped, I thought it might be just a small entrapment. But to see where he was inside that truck at the time was quite a shock. And Athel's a very, very lucky man, very lucky indeed.
I was on the trolley and saw my mother and my sister there and my wife. One of the fellas that I knew, he was the supervisor there. He said, "You've knocked yourself about a bit." He said, "Yeah, we'll fix you up." And then I just went in and out of consciousness for the rest of the day, just doing CT scans, X-rays, going from bed to bed. I woke up, I guess, the next day, and I was up to me hip was all plastered. And I was in the ICU for 4 days and 3 days on the ward. And once I could get up and about, they put some crutches under me. They said, "You're right to go home." So I was off out of the hospital. The boys, youngest fella was looking at everything and wanted to know what happened. And the eldest boy was a little bit reserved and looking around the room. He didn't want to have a look at Dad all smacked about, and had a great big patch on my eye and couldn't see out of the left eye. It was all swollen up, and it was a fair bit of a mess, and big bruises down the right-hand side of my body, and broke my nose, and got all this little cut here, and I was cut up in underneath there. Yeah, it was fairly traumatic. Right from the outset, when I was laying in hospital, I thought, I'm going to get out of this, I'm going to get fitter, I'm going to get stronger, and I'm just going to bust myself till I get to where I want to go. You value things more, like even extra 5 minutes with the kids doing something. That's 5 minutes that I probably would have been going into town doing something that's doesn't mean anything, where you spend more time with the kids, listen to what they want to say, listen to what they want to do, and just be a part of life and stuff. Like, you've just got to value your time, because you just don't know when it's your last time. It's just the flash of an eye, like 1 minute you're going along the road and you're thinking about, I'll have a barbecue at the weekend and go motorbike riding. Next minute you wake up, you're in hospital. I mean, it's the furthest thought from your head. Then you just, the whole thing changes, and your whole world can change. I could have been in a wheelchair, or worse, And the other effects is your immediate family, your kids and your wife, and your mothers, your brothers, your sisters, the whole thing. You know, that's just finished. Won't see you again. All gone, done. It's the people waiting for you at home, and it's your work colleagues too. Like, they've got families, they've got mums and dads and sisters and daughters. And whatever the case is, everybody's responsible for themselves, but responsible for other people as well. And we've all got to work in together. We've all got to be there. We're all there for the one thing: to get paid to come home to support your children, your wife, buy your house, buy your car. So it's all a part of everything, and we've got to look after one another at work. And if you see something that's not right, let somebody know, because they mightn't even know. They might be a newbie and get run over by a forklift because they're looking the other way. They're not used to heavy vehicles, heavy industry, and it's all done, finished, because I've been too lazy to say something to him, you know.
So, I don't know how many times I've watched that video, but it still gets me every time. And I think, you know, it works because it's one of the guys talking about his experience. It's not scripted, it's not an actor, it's real. And that really had a massive impact on how this was received. Right, so so that's great. So you launch this, you launch it to everyone, you get some really great feedback, and then the hard work starts. So you really can't afford to take your foot off the gas. Once it's out there, you know, then you start building the safety narrative, and you start building the safety culture, and it becomes everyone's full-time job, which is exactly what it should be. So it was then incumbent on us to think about how we kind of sustained this and created an ongoing conversation around safety beyond the launch. So we launched a safety strategy. We launched the version that sits on the shelf and gets dusted down every once a year. We also launched a version that people can read and can, you know, understand. So we launched an 8-page booklet that was given to everyone at the same time that they received their internal magazine that quarter. And we mailed it out to, we had lots of fly in, fly out people. We mailed it out to their homes. We try to reach everyone with a copy of this safety strategy. It's given to people as they started the organisation. It was available in waiting rooms and things like that. So it was something that everyone had a copy of, again, translated. And then we looked at training. So I must admit, this is not all my work. So we did have some trainers as well who then did training across the business, and for about 18 months went out and trained people managers around how to do, you know, spot checks and how to manage safety in their particular context. Kind of ensuring that there was a consistency as to how it was managed across the board, whilst tailoring for that particular business unit and that particular site. So the principles were always the same, but the individual behaviour and techniques were sort of different depending on what was being done there. Safety standards, again, they sort of set the bar across the board. Safety champions. So once it was evident that this was going to be something that we needed to sustain across the business, we had individuals who would take up the mantle as being a safety champion for their site. So I was one, for instance, in the head office, and I would make sure that I do odd checks and just talk to people about safety issues. I'd be involved in campaigns that were running and things. And it was really important that people at all levels, at all different sites, were involved in that role. So that was a good thing to do. We had an annual conference, and safety was the theme at that, and then at the first one, and it continued to be a key theme throughout. So I think it's one of those things. It's something that when you start off, you need to over-engineer it. It needs to be everywhere, and the prominent feature. Then over time, it sort of gets woven into the fabric of the business. So we did things like an annual video campaign, similar to what you saw there. We would do one every year and do an annual Stop for Safety. So building on that. And that became a bit of an interesting one, because it was the next year we looked at sort of a site that had done really well, and we filmed that particular site, and we told the story of that site and how they'd improved their reporting and how their lost time injury frequency rate had gone down and what they'd done to achieve that. And it then became a bit of a challenge every year as to who would get the site video, because it was like their chance to show off what they were doing. So that was a bit of a pride moment there for people. It became a regular issue in magazines and internal newsletters. Then there was a quarterly campaign focused around areas of interest. So as you would imagine, the kind of the outcome of doing this work was that the reporting went high, and we encouraged the reporting to go high, because we wanted to see where the near misses were, what was going wrong, so that we could remedy that. And we felt like we had to have a very open culture where reporting was encouraged, so that we could mitigate those issues going forward. So the quarterly campaign would look at that data and determine, if it's slips, trips and falls that needs to be focused on this year, or if it's more seasonal. So we'd often be running a summer campaign in the Southern Hemisphere, so a slip, slap, slop campaign, and a simultaneous Northern Hemisphere campaign around winter tyres. So that was tricky to manage, but again, it made sense to the audience at the time. And then you could just copy it the next 6 months later and switch them around. So it was easy. And then safety, we started a safety share. So at the beginning of every meeting, so if I was presenting this presentation to you before I started, I would have talked about a safety story that I had experienced personally, or something I'd heard about, read about, or an article that I'd recently read, or something like that, as long as it was about safety. And the whole idea was like, it was always on the agenda. It was always something that you're thinking about. It was always something that you were sharing and comparing and learning as a team. And that happened at every level of the business as well. There were toolboxes similar to that on the shop floor. So every day would start with a toolbox conversation. And now and again, with like the quarterly campaigns, we'd throw information in there about the campaign, or if there was a particular news piece in the media that needed to be discussed at a toolbox, we would share that too. And we had safety awards. So as we progressed and as we matured through this process, about 18 months after the original launch, we ran our first safety award. Athol, who you just saw, he got a special award for being an ambassador for safety. And similarly, we were able to bring, I think, about 10 winners from across the business, a couple from the US, a couple from Asia, some from New Zealand, to Australia. And we had about 3 or 4 days where they came. We had, a lovely dinner and black tie sort of award celebration, which was great fun. And then we took those winners to some of the key sites in Melbourne, showed them around some of the contract logistics site and the port and the airport and things. And they were able to see some of the best practice there, but it was also an opportunity for those teams to learn from these prize winners too. So it was a sort of two-way collaboration, engagement opportunity. Bonuses were related to safety targets. Now, this is a contentious issue, and people sort of have two perspectives on this one, but that was something that was done, and that I think that was really to encourage that reporting, so that it was, we were encouraging people to report on any incidents or near misses and things, rather than suppress them in fear of losing bonuses. That wasn't how it worked. So that's something that was done. It's obviously a key focus point for investors and any financial meetings and things. At the time of this, Toll was listed on the ASX, as I mentioned. They've subsequently been bought out by Japan Post, so that's no longer an issue. But that certainly was at the time. We had PPE for everyone, including every member of staff had their own safety vest that they were shown how to wear properly. I'm sure you know, not everyone fastens their safety vest, and it's my biggest bugbear when I see a politician on TV walking around a warehouse with a safety vest flapping open. So everyone was shown how to actually correctly wear their safety vest, and if needed hard hats and steel toe cap boots and whatever to go on site, then they should have that too. And that was encouraged. It was encouraged for everyone, regardless of your role, to visit other sites so you could see what was happening, what best practice looked like, and to learn. Safety induction became bigger. So I think I've recently had some inductions where I've been shown the fire escape and where we congregate in the event of a fire. This was a bit more than that. It went through what safety meant at all, how it was a value, talked, so you knew kind of by the end of, I think it was we went over 2 half days in that first week of employment. You knew by the end of that safety was important. You were under no illusions, and it took you a bit further than where the fire escape was. And then it became part of the recruitment conversation as well. So from the way that we advertised positions, and safety was mentioned in adverts, right through to the interview process, where there were questions built in there, became part of the employee journey. And that's like the next level of maturity, is sort of integrating it within the employee journey. And that's what we started to look at before I left this organisation. And that's, I think, where you get sustainability in this. So beyond that, beyond doing it internally, once the time was right, so it was probably about 18, 20 months after we launched internally, we had the opportunity to do some external work. And I don't know, it's a hard thing. You kind of, it's difficult to know when's the right time to spook about safety or any issue externally. But this felt right. So we partnered with a foundation called the Amy Gillett Foundation, who are a cycling foundation all about cycling and safety. They had a campaign called A Metre Matters, and they were trying to legislate that you should keep a metre between a car and a bike as you pass. So we backed that campaign. We put livery with their logos and stuff all over pickup and delivery trucks, and really try to promote that. There's a short video here, but I'm conscious of time, so I think we'll just skip through that. Another thing we did was we also backed the Driver Reviver, which is on sort of bank holidays, public holidays in Australia. Most people take to the roads and travel within or outside of their state. And so those journeys, as you can imagine, can be anywhere from 3 to 30 hours long, depending on where you're going. And so along the way, you find stop points where you can stop for a cuppa, but in the outback and in the sort of country regions, they are, there's not many service stations. So these pop-up driver revivers occur where there'll be some volunteers serving tea and coffee and some biscuits. And we sort of supported them, and we not only gave them money to be able to run these and run more of them, but we also gave our staff an opportunity to volunteer so that they were able to advocate for safety and to kind of put their money where their mouth was as well, and share what they did. And as a professional driver, you know how important it is to stop. Like it's not even a choice; it's something that you're mandated to do. So it was good for those guys to be able to give something back and to get involved in that as well. And then I think this is just the next campaign that came after sort of 2 years after the original one, and the next iteration of the campaign, the first one being everyone has the right to go home safely. The next one is safety is in your hands. So it's like you've always got to be thinking about what's next and how you can keep this going and how you keep it alive. And that's really the point I was making with that slide there. So what did we learn? A lot. We learned that you kind of can't be half in with this stuff. You need to throw everything at it or just not bother. Safety is something that you kind of can't half bake. So, and that was important from a building trust perspective. People needed to see that we were in it for the long haul and that it wasn't just a kind of PR exercise. We needed to let people tell their stories, and that was probably the most powerful part of the campaign. Was it got blokes talking about safety because they saw someone who looked like them, who was doing just what they did, talk about how he had a very near-death experience, and he talked about it in a very emotive way that sort of made them realise that this could happen to me. This is life. This really could happen to me. So what can I do to make sure it doesn't? And then things like do as you say. So we probably used to do things that we shouldn't do at a head office level, for instance. And it was a chance for us to call it out to each other and say, is that the right thing to do? Should you really, if you're going to go out for a client lunch at lunchtime and have a glass of wine, should you really come back to the office? And no, you shouldn't. So it was like, if we're saying this to the drivers and to the pilots and to all of the people who work in the business, then the same behaviour has to occur here, or it's hypocrisy. And that became the behaviour, that became the standard. It's just great to see. Be inclusive and representative. I think we've talked probably enough about that, but that's a really important key element of this this approach, was people could see themselves there. They could understand that this was for them. It was about them. So that was a really good thing to do. People care. So winning over hearts and minds was a logical thing for us to do with something as a motive of safety, rather than just, the MD was an excellent speaker. We could have and did, in fact, put him in front of the camera, and he said some great stuff about the importance of safety and how you should stop if things weren't safe, and kind of give people permission to do that. But if we'd just done that by itself, there would have been nowhere near the same level of impact. It's important to have that endorsement and that ratification, but it's not the story. So that was, important to do. Get it right inside before you start taking external. It's tempting to shout from the rooftops when you've got something really exciting to talk about, but you need to make sure that it's lived and breathed within the business first, and then it's an opportunity to then share it with the wider community. Show true leadership, and leaders have to be involved. So there's no point, and I'm sure you all know what this feels like and have seen it, but there's no point in kind of paying lip service to this sort of thing. And if all leaders aren't on the same page, it will not work. So it needs absolute leadership, endorsement and support. Be genuine. Yes, mistakes happen. Safety, to achieve zero incidents is a very, very tall order. And so it's a journey to get there. So it's about being honest and about being absolutely genuine, and never stop fighting. I think it's an important thing. It's worth fighting for, and it's something that it will take time to get to where you want to be. So yeah, unfortunately there's no quick fix. It's one of those things, but it can be done. And I think kind of Toll has, they're still very much on a journey. They still have accidents. People still get injured at work. But during the time that I was there, the difference in that was the learning attitude, the fact that there is an opportunity to learn from things that happen kind of across the board, not just within a business unit, but across the board. And also the response, like, that's not good enough. We can't allow that to happen again. Let's change that. I think that they were sort of big behavioural differences that we saw. And that's me. So I guess I'll open up to questions now and sit back and wait for them to flood in. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Danielle. Does anybody have any questions for Danielle regarding safety and the changes she's made through Toll and how they can reflect on their companies?
I've got something that's come through on the chat function. If I can kick off with that one while people get their thoughts together. Did you have any difficulty, Danielle, in finding the volunteers to tell their story about the incidents that they may have had? That's the first part of the question.
We didn't actually go looking for volunteers on that particular one. Yeah, that's an interesting one, because you obviously have to manage the kind of incident that you profile and the root cause and all of that sort of thing. So that was something that we were aware of, and we pursued that. There were a few options that we looked at, but that was the one that we pursued. And I think it came down to the personality, really, and their ability to convey that message. So, but yes, I think reading between the lines, it's important that you choose incidents that are currently under investigation primarily, and can be talked about. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And how did they measure actions against increased observation or safety reporting? How did that get tracked through the campaign?
How did they measure actions in terms? Sorry, there was.
Yeah, how did you measure actions against the improved safety performance? How did you measure what had actually done the trick, if you like?
So a combination of things. So there was the safety dashboard that kind of told us about reporting and trends and that sort of thing, and how we saw that change and evolve, and more people doing that. There was looking at things like the number of people that got involved in the Safety Champions program. We had lots of sort of pulse surveys that would go out monthly that tracked sentiment and response from a comms and engagement perspective. Employee engagement survey. There was a few questions on safety, and also there was some questions around the values and how important they were, and that sort of sentiment improved too. My memory isn't good enough to tell you precisely how that improved, but it definitely went north in the right direction. And we were able to do things like focus groups with certain teams as well, which was useful as well. Just keep checking in and saying, is this working for you? Is this what you want to see? Is this what you want to hear? What are we missing? And we had, and we used that digital champions community quite a bit for that too. And we got some really good feedback. So I think keeping the conversation open and making sure that people have a mechanism to give you feedback and just see that you're listening to that is really important too.
Fantastic. And there's a further sort of follow-up question about that issue of people feeling like they're grassing on their mates, if you kind of like dob them in for anything in particular. How are there any tips that you can suggest to kind of like try and break that cycle? How do you kind of get people to feel confident that, you know, it's not just grassing on your mate, you're actually performing something very vitally important? Yeah,
that's a really good point. I think it's a cultural thing. It's probably, I think of some of the Asian cultures that were really reticent to do that sort of thing, and were quite reluctant to report, and that was a bit of a conversation around, you know, the greater good and having an understanding of what you would do with that information. So it's about building trust in the system and giving people the faith that what you're doing with that information is not pointing finger, but you are part of a learning culture where you want to make a change. And yes, it doesn't, again, happen overnight. They need to see that. They need to see that you're not going to, you know, draw and quarter someone because they've done the wrong thing, but rather you're all going to learn together. And almost that, using that story of Athol kind of did that, because, you know, it didn't say you did the wrong thing or anything like that. It was, you had an accident and let's learn from that. It was very much, sadly, these things happen. We have to learn. And that kind of learning approach helped people open up a bit. Not easy.
How was the bonus structured in such a way that it encouraged the reporting, as opposed to the other way around, which seemed to be the UK way of bonusing people for a reduction in reported accidents?
I can't remember precisely the percentages, but there would be a percentage for the businesses, LTIFR across the board. So if that went down, everyone would get a percentage of their bonus because of that. And if they didn't go down to whatever the target was, then obviously that would be revoked. The individuals were given bonuses depending on what they did in their work, and there will be some, I think it was probably just around the conversation of, this is how we classify this bonus, and it's about, if we see that the reporting has gone up to whatever target, then we're able to attribute this element of the bonus to. It is a tricky one, Kevin, and I don't know the right way to do it. I don't know what your thoughts are on the right way of approaching it, but the intent was that we wanted to see reporting go through the roof, because we wanted to create that culture where people knew that they could report and that the door was always open. And so that was what was really supported. What do you think? What would be the best? What's the kind of way that you approach it?
No, it is difficult, isn't it? It's so you seem to have a combination there of rewarding, a long period without an accident, but also rewarding the reporting of accidents, which is a great balance if you can manage to get a bonus scheme that works like that. We had a bit of an issue in the industry with something called Target Zero. And it was really driving accidents underground. Really, there was a complete lack of reporting of accidents. But you can't hide major accidents and fatalities. So those figures didn't really change a great deal.
That is a fear, isn't it, that you sort of push it away and sort of pretend it doesn't happen. So if you don't encourage the reporting, we used to do a thing. We had a book, like a physical book that we print out, where people could go around and do. I've forgotten the phrase that we used for it, but it was essentially like a spot check, if you like, and you could record it in the book. And then that was also something that you would take into your performance review, and you would talk about the kinds of incidents that you witnessed and how you then approached that conversation with that peer or colleague or whatever. And that was, while that didn't necessarily get entered into the system, it was like an informal way of having the safety conversation and then having a record of that safety conversation to then have the conversation at your performance review. And that, it was almost like it was a prop as well to give people the confidence to have a safety conversation. The sort of hide behind the flip chart or the what do you call it, the board, and hide behind there rather than just front up to someone and say, hey, I saw you did that lashing and it wasn't quite right. Can we just have a look at that again? And so that was a little technique to get around some of that. But yeah, tricky situation.
One difference I see, Kevin, between the Target Zero we did over here and what the Toll Group did is the encouraging of reporting. For me, that was the main difference from this story. Is we never really encouraged reporting. It was, it was seen as a failure. We've all heard the stories of the multinationals where a load and shovel driver would break his leg and they just get him to sit in the office for a month with a cast on his leg, just so he don't count as lost time working, lost time from work. But no, it's the reporting element that's, to me, stands out as a difference in this one.
I put my hand up on this one because I think this is really interesting and something we're relevant sort of discussing on site at the minute. We have a bonus scheme. When they've done an annual, they get paid a bonus, but we're really quite good at reporting. But where I've seen it go that bit further in the last year is because we now, and it's why I asked the question about actioning your reporting system, because we would report really well. And the guys would generally get frustrated that they were reporting things and actions weren't being taken on their reports. We're much better at that now. And sometimes we can't do it because sometimes it requires sort of really significant investment and project work, really, for some of the safety observations. However, if we do put the simple things into action and set ourselves targets and give ourselves KPIs to complete them, the guys that report more and make significantly better reports if they feel like what they're reporting is getting completed over the bonus. And sometimes we'll go through a safety meeting, and we'll tell them how long their LTIs have gone and how far through the year they've gone towards their bonus, and they'll go, oh yeah, really, we're bonus already. But they're so much more encouraged and enthused by seeing things actually happen from their reporting. And like I say, if we just take the time to prioritise, first of all, what they're reporting, but then action it and make a real effort, then the buy-in from them is so much better than the actual bonus system, I think, anyway.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That's so important. One of the things that we were able to do was look at that kind of dashboard of data that was given across the business and work on them. The quarterly campaigns would focus on those particular things. And that might also include a new piece of equipment that was deployed in order to prevent that. Or we had some innovation fund that was created, and there was a trolley that was developed like as a prototype by one of the teams who regularly had the same issue with their own trolley, and that then improved, and they created a new product that we're able to sell across the sector. So that sort of thing really gets people involved and wanting to report, because they can see there's a point to it, there's an end goal, and they are contributing to a safer workplace. So you're right, the bonus is important, but it's also seeing the difference that their contribution is making as well is really important.
Other bonus ideas we've seen was when we did the tour around the Caterpillar factory, which some of us did. I can't remember where it was. Kevin, you might remember the dump truck factory for Caterpillar.
Yeah, in the northeast.
Yeah, up in the northeast.
Oh, Peterlee.
Yeah, that was it. They had notice suggestion boards where people put health and safety suggestions on this board, and then at the end of every month they'd pick a winner, and they would then get a bonus like M&S vouchers or whatever. However, I did notice, I don't know if you remember, Kevin, the managers always pick the cheapest suggestion. Like, let's buy another mop and bucket for Sector A. And other people have got these really good ideas. They never win the prize because it's expensive. But maybe that's an alternative way for bonuses rather than hard targets. You could bonus or reward suggestions, perhaps.
I think giving credit to the people who come up with the ideas as well is always a really big win. And we started putting a board up now where any of the new improvements that we've made on site from a safety observation is on the main board as you come in with the person's name attached to it. So, for example, we've just installed some of the thermometer testing tablets that were suggested in one of the Institute quarry meetings a couple of weeks ago, what my supervisor was on, came to me with the idea. We've installed it. Everybody thinks it's brilliant. So there's a picture up with the improvement, his safety observation, and then his name attached to it. And it's just credit. It's just credit for a good idea and a bit of work. And people like credit, don't they, for good ideas?
Well, I think that's a really, really great idea, mate. I think that's absolutely spot on. I think one of the things as well, listening is with this process is don't let's don't wait for people to actually make suggestions and have boards and stuff like that. It's about management and senior management actually getting out into the workplace and going and talking to people and actually finding out what is happening out there. And also just, there's been quite a lot of talking about the issues and the problems, but there's some fantastic stuff that people are doing every single day of the week. And it's about going and finding out how the good things are done in the business and, and congratulating people and saying, well done for that. Spending as much time being positive with people about the good things that are happening as it is about finding where the near misses and the problems are.
Yeah, absolutely. And using your, everything at your disposal to celebrate those people, your internal comms channels and teams and whatever Yammer and things like that you have. Let's celebrate the positive, and the awards certainly help with that too. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much, Danielle. Fantastic presentation. One of the best we've seen on using the Zoom. Thanks again. And if it was in person, we'd have a round of applause. But yeah, I think we'll just have a quick introduction on the Benevolent Fund for Wanda, and then a 5-minute briefing from Adrian from the HSE. But yeah, thanks again, Danielle.
No worries. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
So I'm Wanda. I'm the welfare officer for the Institute of Quarry and Benevolent Fund. I started in the role 2 weeks before lockdown, which was great timing. But it's been going well since then. And I just wanted to come along to say hello. Well, I wanted to attend the meeting anyway to see what the health and safety side of things needed to be discussed and looked at. So it's a good bit of CPD for me as well. But I wanted to meet people from the branches as well, because ordinarily I'd have come out to meet you all at some point, but obviously that's not really happening at the moment. So, but yeah, I just wanted to sort of make you aware that we're here, and if anybody has any issues or problems or needs any help from us at any point, then please do get in touch. You can access the website through IQ in order to find contact information for me as well. I can put it in the chat at the end here as well, so you've got contact details. We are here to provide financial assistance, obviously, to members of IQ for whatever reason. I mean, obviously, maybe not to buy a boat or anything like that, but, in terms of those people who are necessitous and, are struggling for whatever reason. And currently there are a lot of reasons why people might be struggling. So please do get in touch if you know of anyone who is, or if you are yourself struggling, then please do get in touch. I put things out on LinkedIn every now and again, so please try and find me on LinkedIn and connect with me, so you can see the different things that I put out. We've been working on various media sort of projects in terms of making people more aware of what the fund is all about, who it's for, how we can help. And I did a Q&A webinar that's also on the website, which again goes into a lot more detail. It's a lot of me talking, which is not great, but it's at least to answer some questions, hopefully, for people. And we're doing much more as well than just providing the financial assistance. One thing that we did recently was we sent out a letter to family members, because obviously the Benevolent Fund is available to members past and present and their dependents. So we sent out a letter to past members and their family members, basically. And the response was really, really positive. We have, because I suggested that if anyone was very isolated and they wanted to just have a regular chat, then that is something that I can do, as part of my role as welfare officer. And I've been able to connect with, I think I've got about 34 people now that I have regular contact with who are quite isolated. There was one chap who is an ex-member, a retired member, who hadn't spoken to anybody throughout lockdown. And I think I rang him at about July time. So I was the first person he'd spoken to even. So, I think it's quite a valuable service that we offer. And, it's maybe not what you think it is anymore, I think. We are here to help in whatever way we can. It's about the welfare of our members. And, if I don't know the answer to many things, which I don't know the answer to many things, I'm quite good at finding the answers. So if there's anything that you've got issues with, then please do get in touch, or if you're in need of financial assistance. So that's me, really. I hope that gives you a bit of a taster.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Wanda. Adrian, okay. Are you ready for your debriefing, Adrian?
Yeah, just a quick one. I was asked to give a bit of an update. Can I get a thumbs up from Will to say you can hear me? Thanks, Will. So HSE, as you would be aware, we're all out doing COVID spot checking. So that's continuing. That's across all sectors. But obviously the quarries team are concentrating on the quarries. The main issues we're picking up is social distancing as time goes on. Seems to be starting to fall out of place. We'll go to a quarry. It happened to me. I pulled up and watched 4 guys walk down a set of stairs right behind each other and stand in a group like we did prior to COVID. So it's happening more and more as time goes on. It's just reminding everyone about social distancing. The other big one is the requirement for more frequent cleaning. So whatever you were cleaning before COVID, there's an expectation you'd be doing more frequent cleaning now. The other thing is, don't expect notice of visits. As we came out of COVID-19, the inspectors were giving 24 hours notice. That's no longer a requirement of HSE. So, there was. I turned up at a couple of sites about a month ago, and the quarry managers were quite surprised to see me, as they were expecting 24 hours notice. So, yeah, that's not happening anymore, so don't be surprised. The other thing is geotechnical assessments. So what, not myself particularly, but definitely the colleagues, coming across a lot of geotechnical assessments that are out of date. It tends to be with the majors, and that was because they put their staff on furlough. Now, the HSE gave some leeway in regards to LOLA and pressure testing and things like that because some of the quarries had shut down, plus the testing agencies had shut down. But in regards to the quarries, a lot of quarries kept working. A majority of them kept working during COVID, yet some of the companies decided to put their geotechnical specialists on furlough. So there's been some discussion internally with the quarries team basically saying, well, that wasn't a situation where there was a requirement to do it because the quarries were still open, you were still working. So just bear in mind that if your due date for your geotechnical assessment is due, you might not be getting the leeway from the inspector. He and she will be asking questions about why it wasn't done and reasons around that. There was also some guidance has come out in the last week or so on low-pressured air systems. I don't want to mention the product name, but there is a product that some people are using. You can find the guidance on the HSE's webpage, but I'll just quote you. HSE's view is that the removal of dust from workers' clothing by blowing it off with low-pressured air may not comply with the principles of good control practice in COSH and could put workers' health at risk. There's a lot more information in the position that HSE have put on the webpage. So if any of you are thinking of using it or already using low-pressure air systems to blow operatives' clothing off, you might want to read that because HSE don't necessarily agree with where you might think it fits on the hierarchy. Lastly, a couple of incidents we've had around the country or countries. Face failures. I might have mentioned it at the last meeting, but there's been another one more recently where there's been another face failure onto an excavator. So we've had a couple of operators that are very lucky to still be with us. So that comes back around to some of that geotechnical assessment as well and making sure your geotechnical specialist knows what you're intending to do and how you're intending to do it and just keeping an eye on what's going on. And the ongoing bugbear for all of the inspectors is we're still having lots of issues or finding lots of issues around danger zones and the blasting specs as we're getting out and around to the various quarries. So if we haven't been yet, expect us at some stage. It would be worth a look prior to us getting there to make sure you feel that you're up to scratch. That's all I've got from a HSE point of view.
Well, I think it's been a fantastic evening, but I think now would be a good time to perhaps draw it to a close. But no, thank you for everybody that's contributed. Some fantastic questions from everybody. So, thoroughly enjoyed it.